Good morning, it's Tuesday, Parshas Truma, and February 12th. I think today is really Lincoln's birthday, no? February 12th is the actual birthday of Lincoln, or George Washington, one of the presidents. We have now President's Day, but it used to be two separate holidays, but they combined it because I guess too many other people. Yeah, right. Okay, anyway, yesterday we spoke about an interesting topic, and I just want to review it a little bit. We spoke about whether you're allowed to have a shul like this, and are you allowed to build apartments upstairs and live upstairs. And we went a little back and forth on this, and we distinguished between regular buildings. Well, let me rephrase that. We have a Gemara that says that the shul has to be the tallest building in town, and if there is a building in town which is taller than that shul, that town will be destroyed. Which is very scary.
Is that an old Jewish town, or
any town? There's no such thing as an old Jewish town. Never was, never will be. I don't think there ever was a town where there were only Jews. I mean, everybody's got a Shabbos guy somewhere, you know. That's and not to make light of it. I mean, some of those righteous Gentiles or will be awarded a portion in the world to come.
Even the shtetls?
What?
Even the shtetls weren't 100% Jewish?
Not that I know of. There had to be somebody who brought the cholent from the shul. In the olden days, we used to keep the cholent. There was only one fire going in shul.
They had Erev.
There was no Erev, and everybody would keep their cholent in shul. They would have a guy, transport it.
You didn't have an Erev.
You're not old enough to know, but I am, and I know. Like in the late 1800s.
You're only 2 minutes older than me, Mendy.
Huh?
You're only 2 minutes older than me.
That's it. Anyway, so the Gemara says over there that we're only talking about buildings which are higher than a shul, which is a danger. Buildings that are actually residences. And I gave the example of the Eiffel Tower. If there's a building there for decoration, for architectural beauty, in those cases, those are not a danger to the
city.
To the city. And then those that say that you are allowed to build a second floor brought proof from the temple itself, because the temple had certain levels of kedusha, of holiness, and there was the courtyard, and then you went into the temple itself. It had like an anteroom, and then it had, of course, the temple itself, and within the temple itself there was the Holy of Holiest. But there were parts of it, the entranceway, the hallway, what we call the Azora, had a second floor. That's where they kept the supplies and stuff like that. So we see that you can have something on top of a shul. So, therefore...
Rabbi goes in an office upstairs.
Excuse me?
I said Rabbi could have an office upstairs.
All right, like Alan says, so it looks like there is a distinction, and they do make the distinguishment between having something which is definitely shul related, or something that you do over there which is not mundane. So it's pretty much agreed upon that to have your laundry washer and dryer on top of a shul, or some say even to sleep there, especially a married couple, that shouldn't be sleeping on top of a shul. So then I asked the question, are you allowed to have it in a basement? And I said, my brother has a shul in his basement. It's called basement. That's the name of the shul. And are you allowed to have it in the basement? And so the rabbis debate this. It's a very, very interesting debate, and they want to say that for sure you're not allowed to do anything on top of a shul, because there's another Gemara, and I don't know where it is. I'm sure Alan will let me know. where it says that a synagogue that was destroyed and it's in ruins and it got bombed out, let's say, and the roof is just laying on the floor, you can't, I guess you can't display your wares or it talks about fruits. You can't put your fruits out there, let's say you want to sell your fruits to show it to the public. You can't even do that because it's a desecration of the shul. So if you can't even put fruits, which is not a bad thing, and the synagogue is not even there anymore, you can't do that. Certainly when a synagogue is standing, and you shouldn't be able to do anything on the second floor if you can't even do something like that. And can anybody think of a distinguishment why you would be able to? Well, because we don't really have time. So the answer to that is that it's different if you do something on the roof than if you do something on the second floor. Because if you do something on the roof, it's visible to the public. So it's an embarrassment. A guy, even a Jew goes by and sees, once there was a shul there, now they're using it for a farmer's market. So that's an embarrassment for the shul. But if you have a nice shul like this and you have an attic, and in the attic, hypothetically, you would have the rabbi's office, like Alan said, that doesn't seem to be such a terrible thing to do. So it's very complicated. There's all kinds of questions and answers being asked, and I'm just going to shortcut it. And we come to the final resolution to this matter, which is pretty much universally accepted, that whether you can build a shul in a basement, and the answer is yes. And the reason is because, as Alan said yesterday, there's a difference making a shul in a house. Then how did you word it that way? Or making a house, you can make a shul in a house, but you can't make a house in a shul. In other words, if something was originally built like the Beis HaMikdash, because we're always comparing it to the Beis HaMikdash, like the Holy Temple, if something was originally built for a holy place, for a holy temple, then you can't go and diminish its value, diminish its level of kedusha, of holiness, by now doing something else with it, no matter what level of mundane it is. However, if you have a house, and again, the case with my brother, you had a house which was just a normal residency, and now you want to make a shul downstairs, that they say is...
It's all over in Brooklyn. They do the shtibel.
Right,
all over.
But I heard you ma'alim bekedusha v'lo moredin.
That's the point that I was making.
Okay.
That you can raise your level of kedusha. So if you had a house, which every house that Jews live in is a holy place, whether it has a shul or not, if you want to intensify the kedusha and put in a shul in there, that certainly would be allowed.
And actually,
I want to move on from this because that's not the subject for today. That was yesterday's.
Just a comment. I heard about a lot of different things. Like you have Sefarim and you want to buy Sefer Torah.
Right.
The same thing. You could sell the book and buy a Sefer Torah.
Right. There's a Gemara. The Gemara talks about that in Masechtas Megillah, like what you're allowed to do with monies that in exchange. If you have books and you want to exchange that to buy a Sefer Torah, you're allowed to, because you're raising in the level of kedusha.
Isn't it also a mitzvah though, to make a shul in a house?
If it's so they talk about that, and yesterday I touched on it a little bit. There's nowhere in the Torah does it say you should have a shul. The concept of having a shul is not in the Torah, and based on that, people say that we talked about yesterday whether we have to behave in this shul the way days of old when there was a Beis HaMikdash. Do we have to behave in the same decorum?
What about the unwritten rules?
So I'm saying, so therefore they say it could only be, good morning, it can only be part of the unwritten rules, and it's only rabbinical as opposed to biblical. It can't be biblical because, as I said yesterday, it's not in the Torah.
Yeah, well, but you did say yesterday.
Yes.
God handed down Moses unwritten laws.
Right.
So aren't those unwritten laws
Okay,
the same
we don't know.
as written?
Yes, but we can't on our own decide that this is something that was given to Moses and it's biblical. So unless we have proof that it's biblical, or somebody maybe the Rishonim, maybe like people in the level of Rashi or the Rambam, they could say that was given to Moses, but we can't decide that on our own. Okay, now I just want to go into a little other area, but still talking about the sanctity of the shul. You come into shul, and by the way, the Rambam says something else also very interesting. The Rambam Maimonides also says, bless you, that not only, it's almost the same thing, but not quite. He says the shul has to be built on the highest elevation of that town. So not only does it have to be the tallest building, but it has to be on the highest point. So the difference would be is if you had a city that had hills and valleys, you can't build it in a valley and then just make it very tall that it towers over all the other buildings, because it has to actually be on the highest elevation. Now, which way do you have to face? Where should you face when you daven?
East.
Okay, so
Depends where you are.
He says Yerushalayim depends where you are. You said east.
Okay, well,
You said Bubby's. What? Oh, Jerusalem. Oh, okay. So you're all correct, but it's not so simple. It's not so simple. There is a halacha that the Shulchan Aruch brings down, that the doors in a shul should be facing the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark. Why? So that when you come into shul, I know this is probably going to be off camera, when you come into shul, you should open up the doors and you should right away bow down when you come into shul. If you say, the first part of davening, Ma Tovu Alecha Yagam Shkasecha Yisrael, how, it talks about next thing that you bow down. So the door should be in such a way that it coincides that when you bow down, you should be facing the Aron Kodesh. That halacha is a little vague, and because it tells you that you have to have the doors opposite the Aron Kodesh, but it doesn't tell you where the Aron Kodesh is. Now, we all answered east, Yerushalayim, this because you think that's the fact today, but where do you get the basis for that? Okay.
What about a shul? They have two Aron Kodeshes.
Okay.
They have a chapel and a main sanctuary.
Okay. So, then it's two shuls. The fact that it's
one could be here, one could be there.
So there's an interesting Gemara, Brachas, which is the first tractate of Shas, page Daf Lamed, and this pretty much is 90% of the law, and we'll talk about it. It says like this: a blind person. Maybe I should just mention what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah talks about, the Gemara Brachas talks about, even though Brachas means blessing, and I think I may have mentioned this once, it talks a lot about not so much the blessings, but it talks about the davening. And again, when I say davening, what am I talking about? Shmona Esra. There is a mitzvah, a biblical mitzvah of saying Shema, that is separate from the mitzvah of davening, of saying Shemona Esrei. The mitzvah of saying Shema, as I mentioned many times, is biblical. You have to do it twice a day. The mitzvah of davening is debatable whether it's biblical or rabbinical. Nevertheless, this Masechta talks about when you should daven and how you should daven and which way you should daven. And then the Gemara says, what about a blind person? God forbid somebody is blind. Summa, if somebody is blind. Or, umisha eino yochel lechavenes aruchos, or somebody who cannot distinguish where he is. Assuming you took a flight to Tokyo, it stops on the way in I don't know where it stops. It stops in Bangladesh or somewhere, and you get off the plane. It's time for mincha. You have no idea where you are, which way is east. It's the middle of the night, so you don't have the sun. Where do you? You're in the same category as a blind person. Where do you daven? So the Gemara says.
Not right where you are.
The Gemara says, "Yechavan libo keneged over shebishmaim." You should concentrate. Your heart. You should be facing towards God in heaven. Now, what if you're what if you're standing in Chutz La'aretz? You're not in Israel. Omed b'Chutz La'aretz. Yechavan es libo keneged Israel. You should face your heart towards Israel. What if you're in Israel? Hoyomed beit. If you're already in Israel, what do you face? Yechavan libo keneged Yerushalayim. You point your heart towards Yerushalayim.
Point your heart, or you direct yourself?
You direct your heart towards Yerushalayim. Very good question. What if you're already in Yerushalayim? What do you do?
Beit HaMikdash.
Keneged Beis HaMikdash. So, I have no idea why the Gemara had to say all this when we had Benny. Nevertheless, it's good that it's written because, this way only Benny would know about it. So if you're in Yerushalayim itself, you have to, short on time. Anyway, and what if you're already in Beis HaMikdash? Then you face it towards the Holy of Holiest. And what if you're already in the Holy of Holiest? Then you face it toward Aron Kodesh. So it seems to be clear over here that you have to be facing towards towards Israel and Yerushalayim. So if that's the case, if you're in the United States, it's east. If you're in South Africa, it's north. If you're in Iraq, it's west. So there doesn't seem to be an exact thing. Now, I have to really now fast forward to all the way to the end. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra which deals with the laws of damages, and it says, when we do something, we have to always be aware of our neighbors and what damage we can cause to them. And it talks about neighbors, how they should behave, and it talks about what if somebody wants to set up a business where there's going to be a bad smell or a very strong smell. So it says that you can distance yourself a certain way, and you can do it anywhere you want except west. Why not west? Because that's where God's divine presence is.
West.
Of the smell?
Of the west of the world, just on the western side. So if I have a piece of property and I want to set up a tannery and it's going to give off a foul smell, you should not do it on the western portion of your property, because God dwells in the western portion. And he says, how do we know this? Because it brings down a pasuk. It says that all the stars, and meaning the sun also, shall bow down to you. Now the sun is in the east. If he bows down, if the sun is bowing down, he's bowing down to the west. So from there he brings proof that God is in the west, and which is a direct contradiction of what we just said, that God is, you should be facing east. So very quickly, because I'm going to get hit on the head in a minute, there are two answers that reconcile these two Mishnahs. One says that it's not a contradiction. One is talking about where you should physically be, and one is talking about where your heart should be. So, and it brings proof because it starts off with a blind person. A blind person can't see, so it talks about his heart should be facing Yerushalayim. But it's so basically you can be in the west, but you should be facing towards the east. That's one way they reconcile it. The other way they reconcile it is that unfortunately one Gemara is talking about in the time when there was still a temple. And then you should be facing everything towards Yerushalayim and the temple and so on. However, the Gemara later on in Babasa talks about after the destruction. Now, very quickly, I'm going to leave you with a question. What happens? So we know that we have to face the Aron Kodesh, and we know we should be facing towards Israel, which means now it's towards east. So we have two rules: facing the Aron Kodesh, facing east. What happens if you walk into a shul and the Aron Kodesh is not on the eastern wall, do you face the Aron Kodesh, or do you face east? Or in this case, the benches. Look at the way the benches in this shul is. When you daven, should you be facing the Aron Kodesh, Aron the Kodesh, or should you be facing? When you get up, you're not really facing east. You're facing south.
Let's face Aron Kodesh.
The Aron Kodesh is not east anyway.
East is that way.
East is this way.
All right. So I'm not talking particularly about this shul. We can go in Borough Park and we see two shuls on the same block, and because the architecture designed the shul, one is the Aron Kodesh is facing one way, one the Aron Kodesh is facing another way. So what is your position? Should you follow east, or should you do and go against the grain of the whole shul? The whole shul is davening one way because you want to be at Tzaddik and face east, or do you follow with the rest of the crowd? So as always, we turn to the Mishnah Berurah, which comes to a solution and a halacha and all these things. Lo and behold, on this one he says, I'm stuck. I don't know. Have a good day, everybody.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.